Hello, and welcome to the video. Thanks for joining me. This is going to be a part 1 of 7. I'm going to be doing one for each day of the week. They might not actually end up being each and every day of the week, seeing as how I have things going on, but all the same, I'd like to try to post one video every day this week, just to put a various swathe of content out there. So this first one today is actually a reading from something that I wrote back in college. I started a academic blog, and I forget what this blog was about exclusively, but it had something to do with, man, goodness. Well, it had to do with blogs. I was meant to take a look at a number of different blogs on the internet and to sort of get an idea of what I might like to write about as a consequence. So this is a little bit of just sort of my own thoughts and then a brief overlooking of at least 3 different online blogs, which are certainly interesting, that you can go ahead and take a look at if you'd like. So let me just read what I have. The blog entry is called Gods and Blogs. Begin. One of the ways I like to conceptualize existence is through the lens of meaning. It is the kind of meaning that is felt true without introduction, recognized as vivid, moving, and with lack of a better word, spiritual in the kind of feeling it invokes in its relevance to the person experiencing it. It is exactly the kind of moment where one might notice a sort of set of experiences coming together throughout a time span of a lifetime thus far that conveys a message of great importance in regards to the actions one might have taken. It might also manifest as a laughter out of the blue to the uninformed onlooker, but as a perfectly appropriate means to laugh given the observation of the individual who has noticed a pattern, so to speak, that he or she had predicted about life that has come into view. Some of you may be familiar with this sort of foggy notion I am putting forth. For those of you who are not, and also to give a second and more useful perspective into this idea that may help clarify for all readers, I will provide the words of my father. Quote, I think that God is literally everything in the universe trying to experience itself. Unquote. And that has always stuck with me since its utterance. I think it has done this precisely for the reason that it sort of neatly describes a categorical structure of existence, and consciousness for that matter, with a framework roughly speaking of, quote, thing that experiences itself and knows it's doing so, unquote. Such a feeling is hard to define, but impossible to miss. It's in a sort of sense when you know in some deep way, indescribable with language at present, that you are precisely where you ought to be, or for that matter something else is. It is in this way we recognize the artist as being profound for whatever truth he or she hath reflected in their music or pictorial representation. It is in this same way we are moved by mere words that come even close to speaking true meaning in life using our primitive language. Why is it that I call this concept to our attention? Simply put, because it is relevant. One could argue that my father's quote is accurate because each and every one of us is not only trying to orient ourselves to be within those ideal places of existence where meaning is found, or the moments/places where we feel quite rightly appropriate in being at the moment, but moreover because we are perpetually attempting to teach this idea of proper orientation on a daily basis to our fellow human being. Pieces of the infinite all, trying always to find their proper place. When considering this perspective, the idea of blogs is really simple. It's us silly humans attempting to teach other silly humans to try and not be so damn silly, if at all possible. And I like that. Brief hiatus. This is where I go into talking about the other blogs that I was meant to research. My reflection on the whole thing is pretty much over. But For those of you still sticking around, I'm going to go ahead and read the rest of the blog, because there are some interesting ones that I did find in all this, so you might be interested. Continuing on. So looking at blogs in this sort of way, we can see why the points discussed are wide and innumerable in countenance. Some are just for plain fun. The blog Kotaku, for example, is a guide for those of us just wanting to get familiar with new happenings and interesting stories surrounding the gaming world at large. See https://kotaku.com. This particular site is very proficient at providing short and to the point digestible content that avoids long course articles to maximize content creation for readers. For this reason, I definitely suggest it as a good reference to learn how to write compact but enjoyable content. The next blog, Science is Beauty, see https://scienceisbeauty.tumblr.com, is a good and bad blog, but for kind of a picky reason. It is great for the wide amount of intellectual ideas it brings to a curious reader's attention. It also has a frequent aspect of humor that peppers in between the more serious articles, and actually frequently brings humor to scientific ideas. The only complaint I have with this site is that there isn't much lengthy perspective of the author on the topics. It is moreover short commentary, though this is likely to maximize content creation. The final blog I visited was called Barataria, see https:// Eric Hare, spelled ERIKHARE.com. In this blog, centered around politics, I found a very nice blog which I think is professional in structure and is particularly good at discussing perspective. The writer uses very straightforward titles of the articles, engages the readers with an interesting question about the topic, and then walks the reader through the material rationally, addressing the aspects of the issue with an inquisitive and thoughtful interpretation of the answers to the posed questions. Now, for those of you still listening, this is where I do reflect on the entire project in the blog, and I continue. In all of these blogs, I see a fragment of the universe trying to figure itself out, to experience itself. There then one might recognize that our attempts to teach anyone anything is representative of the earlier mentioned quote of this blog to be true. We seek experience. We recognize when it is optimal. And with even a sliver of an idea of what it feels like, we then attempt to guide others along the path of life to experience such a thing in their own lives properly. Thus I believe is the course of nature, the justification and function of consciousness simultaneously, self-serving, infinite, upper limits unknown. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.